Hello and welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Thursday, April 14, and we have a great show for you. Our guest today is Library Trustee Jon Margolis, and we're going to talk about all the things the library is doing and really has been doing throughout pandemic. Like everyone else, they've gone through a series of changes, and I believe have come out better on the other side. And Jon's going to tell us all about it. But first, the news nationally. In an effort to reduce the price of gasoline, President Joe Biden has announced that the Environmental Protection Agency will lift its prohibition of ethanol gas this summer. It will also increase the mix from E10 to E15. That's the maximum level. The Biden administration is also looking to send additional arms to Ukraine. Preliminary plans include an aid package possibly valued at $750 million. Tuesday morning in Brooklyn, we saw a tragic turn with a mass shooting in a subway train, leaving 24 civilians injured. The police have since identified a person of interest, and multiple cities have responded by increasing security measures in their mass transit systems. COVID-19 cases continue to rise, with the Massachusetts Department of Public Health reporting a 53% increase in infections since last week. And in fact, we just saw Philadelphia has rolled out a mask requirement indoors. And so be thinking about how best to protect yourself and your loved ones. The Massachusetts House of Representatives released its FY23 budget yesterday, with debate scheduled to start on April 25th. Highlights include a substantial increase in funding for public K-12 education, free school lunches, the elimination of fees for jail and prison phone calls, parole, and probation, an increase in funding for climate change regulatory enforcement, and much, much more. On Sunday morning in Boston, a man died after getting caught in the door of an MBTA Red Line subway train. The 2022 U.S. Open will be held at the Country Club in Brookline from June 13th to June 19th. On Monday, Brookline town officials outlined the various protocols that will be implemented to ensure safety, environmental health, and respect to the pandemic. A former Brookline school teacher has been charged with 18 counts related to sexually assaulting a student in a Brookline public school. There will be a COVID-19 vaccine clinic at the Senior Center beginning today, just as this program ends at 3 p.m. until 6 p.m. There will also be a COVID-19 vaccine clinic at the Florida Ruffin Ridley School on the evening of Tuesday, April 19th. That's the news for the day, really for the week. And we're going to see you on the flip side with a pre-recorded conversation with Library Trustee Jon Margolis. Stay tuned on Brookline Interactive Group's TV on TV.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And as promised, here on Brookline Interactive Television's TV on TV, we have Library Trustee Jon Margolis for today's interview. Jon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine.
Well,
It's
thanks.
a lovely spring day.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show, and delighted to talk about one of Brookline's favorite institutions, the public libraries. And my understanding is that you have spent more than a minute or two helping to make those libraries the great institutions they are today.
Well, I've done a little bit. I've been on the Board of Trustees since 2005. I have to think what exactly. And as I like to say, my job as a trustee is primarily to stay out of the way of the staff. So I'm not sure how much I have contributed to making the libraries what they are today, but we try.
I suspect you've done all right. And I think I actually want to start with library leadership with Sarah Slyman. My understanding is she is no longer, or will soon no longer be with the Brookline Public Libraries. Do I've got that right?
Very sadly, you do. Sarah will be leaving at the end of, I believe, the second week of May, she submitted her resignation. She will be going down to the library in Quincy. And for anyone who doesn't know Sarah, this is a tremendous loss for the library and for the town of Brookline.
And so has the trustees begun the process of finding a new director, or are we too soon for that?
The process that we have begun is, and I think we're fairly well along already, is finding an interim director for the next few months while we swing into a comprehensive search for a director. The last time when Chuck Flaherty left in 2014, he gave us 8 months' notice. And we took pretty much all that time to find Sarah. This year, we hope to do it a lot more quickly because we don't have someone who's been around for 22 years. Around makes Chuck sound less effective than he was. And so I apologize to him for that, but we'd like to do it more rapidly than that, but it's a complex process.
Well, no doubt the 12 library trustees are up to the task. And I wish you the best of luck. More on staffing. Obviously, the libraries were closed for a while, and then they were open with curbside service. And more recently, were fully open to the public. But then I guess maybe it was in January, you dialed it back for just 2 weeks. Can you tell us sort of about that process and why you had to bring back service, and then what happened after that?
Well, with the Omicron surge, we had about 30% of the staff was out sick. So we simply could not keep the buildings open. So we went back to curbside service for a couple of weeks, and our patrons were remarkably patient with us, as they were a year ago when we had to do that for a prolonged period of time. But we were able to reopen, and as of now, we're going full blast.
That's great. And I presume you have some sort of protocols to decide when you're going to change your operation, right? You're independent, so you can make your own decisions for the libraries.
Well, we don't have protocols in the sense of a set figure. I know there's talk about mask mandates when the positive test rate gets below a certain point or something like that for particular towns or cities. We don't have something like that. We look at the situation. In January, it was staff shortages. I think in the first closure, it was largely the prevalence of the disease among the public. So there may be a number of factors, but we can be nimble enough to react effectively.
I want to get into why people come to the libraries, all the stuff you've got. And my understanding is you have books. I know you have books because my son churns through about a dozen a week, and my daughter's up to like 4 or 5 a week, which is fabulous. But my understanding is you've got more than just books these days.
We've got a lot more than books. If you want to scan the sky, you can get a telescope to take out. There may be a waiting list. I think they're pretty nice telescopes. I haven't actually used one. So you can do some, at least beginning astronomy if you like, or if you're a hobbyist. You can do 3D printing. You have to reserve for that, but you can print objects. We now have a library of tools you can take out, which includes some pretty powerful power tools. We do require a release, and only adults can take those out, but we have hand tools as well. For several years, we've had a library of cake pans. If you want to make that bunt cake and you don't have a bunt pan, as there are people who do not, hard to believe, you can get one at the library. You can get a springform pan and make that New York style cheesecake. And if you want to, I can tell you the secret to a good cheesecake.
My secret is I get on the green line and ride it to modern pastry.
Well, that's Italian cheesecake. That's not New York cheesecake. It's fine, just different.
And operating this library with the new media, I don't even, do you call it media or tools media? What's the part?
It's more, the generic term is a library of things. If you've been to the Brookline Village Library, you might notice outside the front door, there has been a library of sticks.
I saw
For
that.
dogs. For those
And
who
you
have dogs.
They don't even need a card.
No, they do not.
And
And they don't need to return them.
but they could also, you accept donations, right? So
Yes, yes, we do. So, no, but we still have books. I tend to take books out, although with the pandemic, I got into downloading electronic books, which is great because they're right there on my iPad. But we have physical books. We have a wide range. I'm missing, I'm sure, a large number of our offerings, but you can find them. And before we went on camera, Tommy and I were talking about the Minuteman library system. You can borrow books from other libraries that are in the Minuteman system or through interlibrary loan from libraries at least across the Commonwealth and even across the country. Diana is an academic. She's a medievalist, and she has got books through interlibrary loan from Amherst, and I believe from farther away than that. So it's really a connection to the knowledge of the world.
and I know also, again, because my son is an avid patron, DVDs, video games. Library's got lots of things. And so I'm sure there's sort of a long-standing budgetary process, grants or whatever, to acquire books and periodicals. I mean, libraries have been doing that for a long time. How do you figure out how to pay for the more innovative or the more recent kinds of offerings? Is there are you finding grants for this, or you've just got a really sweet person who just slips you tools under the door?
Well, some of it has been donations. We do have actually we have a straightened budget. We don't get everything we'd like from the budget from the town, but we do have a good books and materials budget, in part because of the library's endowment, so that a certain amount of the income from the endowment is used every year for acquiring materials. And less of that is books these days, because books are less of the information universe than they used to be, although to me, they're still of the most important. But then again, I read the newspaper online these days. I don't read the physical newspaper so much anymore.
And does it still have that long wooden pole if you read the newspaper at the library? I remember when I was a kid, they'd have all the newspapers hung on these wooden poles. So you wouldn't...
The last time I looked at, I think that yes, they did. I think the reason for that is, number one, it makes it easy to spread the newspaper out, but it also makes it harder to walk off with the paper.
Well, or just get the parts mixed up and...
Right.
So town meeting is going to be voting a budget that will presumably be proposed by advisory committee, and part of that certainly includes library. And unlike the schools, where the town simply cuts a check to the school committee and the school committee chooses how to spend the money with the libraries, the town meeting votes on how much money is going for the different programs or costs in the library. Is that process working? well for you and your view as a library trustee?
Well, would we like to have more money? Yes. We several years ago got approval to have a facilities director. As you know, we've got 3 buildings of various sizes and various ages with function rooms. We don't rent out for functions, but we have programs in rooms. And we could use someone to manage those. We got a budget allocation, and then with the pandemic, that went south and it hasn't come back. Are our librarians paid as much as they ought to be? No, they're not, but especially at the professional, that is the upper levels, the director and the assistant directors. We do not pay in Brookline what comparable or many comparable libraries pay, including libraries in towns that are nice to live in that are less expensive than Brookline. And you and I know, Tommy, that it's not confined to the libraries, that there has been a pervasive sense in Brookline for a long time that it's an honor to work here, so maybe you should be willing to take less money. I don't know how well that worked in the past. It's working less well now. So this is, Sarah Slyman has been here for 8 years. She said publicly many times she intended to retire from Brookline. I don't know all of the reasons why she's leaving, but I can guess at some of them.
Yeah, and of course, as some of our viewers know, the annual increase in total budget for the town of Brookline is limited by Prop 2.5, which means that the tax revenue from property tax that can be collected on properties that essentially the year earlier grows in aggregate by a total of 2.5%, which is great when inflation is low and when healthcare costs are flat, but we haven't seen that in a long time, right? We've seen healthcare costs growing quickly, and now we're into an inflationary period. And so the town's ability to increase wages is trailing people's costs. And this is, some think that's an unfortunate coincidence. Others think that was by design. But in either case, the 2 places Brookline can get more revenue are either through development of presumably commercial real estate or by the townspeople voting to increase the budget. And we haven't done that for a broad set of expenditures in decades.
We are, as a town, as you know, Tommy, and I suspect the people out there watching know, we are behind the 8 ball because the simple fact is that a residential town like Brookline develops greater expenses per person, per capita, as you increase the spending or improve the schools, the libraries, and other public services. Towns and cities like Boston or Cambridge or Somerville that have a large amount of commercial property have a relatively lower need for expenses for those things. And so it's tougher and tougher for us to balance our budget. There's no doubt about it.
And things may come to a head soon. It's not just the library personnel whose wages haven't kept up, as you mentioned. We're seeing it on both the town side and the school side. So it's certainly going to be a challenge. I think the libraries have 2 advantages in that relative to the total budget, it's pretty small
Yes.
and well-loved.
I have said, and nobody's really argued seriously with me, that the library is the most loved institution in the town. It's really been great because I've had very little to do with it, but I get the benefit from the popularity of our libraries.
And I've heard, I don't know if I'll say this exactly right, but I've heard some metrics about the Coolidge Corner Branch Library, that if it were its own library system, it would be ranked 7th in Massachusetts. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's somewhere up there. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but yes, It's, I believe, the most popular branch. There may be one branch in Boston that does a little more business than Coolidge does, but it is tremendously popular and deservedly so.
Now, recently, there's been a change in philosophy, I think both in Brookline and in other places, about fines for returning your books late, right? There's this sort of lore in America about, like, you find a book that somebody checked out in 1965 and you bring it back and they say, you owe us $12 in late fees, right? But that's changed recently. Tell us about that.
Well, there has been a movement, I think it's decades old, but for fine-free public libraries. Sarah sent around a notification that Chicago had become a fine-free public library, and she takes the modern view that doesn't like hyphens so much. So I said, I'm sure Chicago has been a fine-free public library for many decades, but we have not managed to eliminate fines in Brookline because it's not up to the trustees. It's up to the select board, because the fines do not go to the library, they go to the general fund. So if you folks out there want to do away with fines in Brookline, talk to the select board.
Do you have any idea, and we didn't talk about this beforehand, so I certainly forgive you if you don't have it off the tip of your tongue, like, are we talking like hundreds of dollars a year, thousands, billions?
We're talking about a few tens of thousands. It's a minuscule part of the town's budget of more than 300.
Well, and I imagine there's additional staff time required to collect the money.
There is some, perhaps more expensive to the library is that librarians don't want to be doing that. So,
yeah, it's probably pretty tough squeezing nickels out of a 7 or an 8-year-old who brings back their book late, right?
we don't do that. We squeeze their parents.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Around the Lunar New Year, I came to the library, and the library was, calling it lending isn't quite right. I guess they're really giving out kits around the Lunar. I say giving, not lending, because we didn't have to bring them back.
Craft kits.
Tell us about the kits and sort of the idea behind them, and if that's going to become a permanent feature, or
I think it is a permanent feature. In all honesty, I don't know a great deal about craft kits, but I gather that they are tremendously popular. They certainly were during the pandemic when people could not come into the library. It was a great way for us to relate to our patrons and show them that we were still involved. Now that we're back and doing live programming as well, that helps too, but the craft kits will go on, I'm sure.
Another thing that folks may not even realize yet, although the renovation is done for some time now, of course, the Coolidge Corner Branch Library was renovated, and that opened up, if I recall correctly, just before COVID. And so folks
Yes.
from other neighborhoods in Brookline may not realize that. Tell us about the renovation.
Well, the renovation, it's more than cosmetic, but what you'll notice most is the cosmetic. It was a rearrangement inside to make it a much more workable space. We separated off an area for the children's library, which it's a nice place for the kids to come in and pull out books and do a little playing and read. Which it's more separated, which frankly makes the rest of the library a little quieter, perhaps. We did not do what we originally wanted to do, which was add a floor onto the library, expand it substantially. It just proved financially impossible to do that. And I had nothing to do with this, so don't give me any credit, but they did a fabulous job in rearranging things and new signage and new colors. It's a lovely space. And it pays homage to the era of the 1960s when it was built, which I happen to like. It's not my favorite. age of architecture, but I like the honesty of the building.
I mean, you were what, in like your young 30s back then, so.
When it was renovated?
The
or built?
1960s.
Yeah, a little less than that, but yes, I am old. There's no doubt about it.
And you've got an election coming up for library trustees, but it doesn't appear that there's a whole lot of tension in those races.
There's actually 3 people running for 4 slots because one of our incumbents decided at the last minute not to re-up. There is someone running for a 3-year slot on a write-in candidacy. I don't know that you want me to mention the name. I can if you.
Yeah, I think it's fine. We want to inform folks with what we know,
Okay.
and as we learn more, we'll tell them more.
Rich Fredkin is running for a 3-year slot as a write-in. He had applied for the vacancy that came up during the past year. So there is a 1-year slot because Laurie Cawthorn, who was elected by the Board of Trustees and the Select Board in a joint convention. She is running for a 1-year term, which is what you have to do if you fill an unexpired term. And so Rich has stepped into the breach as a write-in for a 3-year term. So there's not a contest, but we do want you to go out and vote.
That's right. And that election is Tuesday, May 3rd. Polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And folks should take a little bit of care because of the re-precincting process. Many folks no longer vote at the same location that they used to. And so unless you want to go for an extra long walk on Tuesday, May 3rd, it might make sense to double check ahead of time and make sure you know where you'll be voting.
And those who had precincts that shifted during the pandemic, as mine did, I'm in precinct 7, we're back where we used to be on Park Street. So
61 Park Street, if I recall.
I think so. So check the list on the town website to see where you vote.
Well, Jonathan, always great to chat with you, and love learning about the libraries. We're just about out of time, but I want to give you, one more bite of the apple. Any last words on the trustees and the libraries?
Well, thank you, and come use the library. That's what it's there for.
Jon Margolis, thanks for appearing on Brookline Interactive's TV on TV program. We're very grateful for your service, both as a library trustee and a town meeting member. And we are very grateful for the public libraries, for the staff, for the materials, and for the work of the trustees.
Thank you.
You have a great day, and we'll see you next week on TV on TV.